Agatha Raisin and the Botox Alibi. Tonight's mystery unfolds in quiet little Castle, where one insult, one secret, and one deadly lie set Agatha Raisin on a collision course with murder. Settle in, press play, and tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Castle woke beneath a bright, brittle cold that made the hedgerows shine like polished glass. It was the sort of cheerfulness Agatha Raisin always suspected of ulterior motives. She paused at her gate, tugging her coat tight, and eyed the sunlight with narrow distrust. Weather like this encouraged villagers to step outside and chatter, which meant a fresh supply of gossip she was not yet awake enough to endure. Hodge sat on the front windowsill, tail flicking, watching her with mild disdain. His expression clearly said that leaving a warm cottage for village nonsense was her own fault. Agatha stuck her tongue out at him in an unladylike gesture. He blinked once and looked away. Even her own cat thought he was above her. The shop bell jingled as Agatha entered, hoping for a quiet purchase of milk and a packet of biscuits. Instead, she walked directly into a wall of excited whispers. Doris Simpson, hunched over the magazine rack, tightened her lips in the universal Castle signal for juicy news. "Oh, morning, Mrs. Raisin," Doris said, voice pitched with innocent delight. "You'll never guess who's back." Agatha gave her a cool glance. "Unless it's my youth, I doubt I'll be thrilled." "Petunia Blatherwick," Doris declared. "Back from one of those wellness retreats. Looks 10 years younger, she does." A murmur ran through the other customers. Someone near the bread counter added, "More like 15. Another chimed, "Suspicious, if you ask me." Agatha stiffened. She had met Petunia Blatherwick twice and disliked her immediately. The woman had a sharp tongue, sharper heels, and a habit of treating everyone as if they were interview candidates for a job she had already decided they were unfit for. 10 years younger, is it?" Agatha muttered. "Probably pumped her face full of something it shouldn't be pumped with." Unfortunately, she said it louder than intended. Doris let out a delighted gasp. "Botox?" "If she's had anything injected," Agatha replied. "Let's hope it was self-esteem." Two WI ladies near the tins paused mid-whisper, heads turning like owls on alert. Too late. The remark had spread. Agatha felt heat creep up her neck. She pushed her milk and biscuits onto the counter, paid briskly, and escaped before the whispers multiplied. The WI hall was worse. By late morning, the village women had gathered to prepare decorations for the upcoming Castle fete. Agatha entered intending to be dignified, but dignity rarely behaved itself around her. A chatter spread like wildfire the moment she stepped in. Every face wore the smug glow of people who had learned something new and intended to rub it in immediately. And there, at the centre of the hall, stood Petunia Blatherwick herself. Her skin was unnaturally smooth, stretched tight across her cheeks in a way that made her look both youthful and faintly startled. Her hair was styled into careful curls, and her lips were painted a glossy, triumphant red. She smiled at Agatha, the kind of smile that wished to be a slap. "Mrs. Raisin," Petunia purred, loud enough for all. "I hear you've been discussing my face." Agatha felt every pair of eyes lock onto her. She inhaled, trying for calm. "Someone mentioned you'd had a little enhancement." Petunia fluttered her lashes. Jealousy is unattractive at our age. A mean little ripple spread through the room. Agatha, never one to retreat gracefully, snapped, "Well, cheap Botox does have side effects, like delusions of superiority." A shocked silence. Then the whispers exploded, bouncing off the hall walls like frantic bees. Mrs. Bloxby, arranging flowers, gave Agatha a gentle, pained look, which somehow made her feel twice as ridiculous. Petunia tossed her smooth head. "I don't have time for petty women trying to claw back their lost youth," she declared, stomping away with theatrical flair. Agatha longed to throw a paperweight at her retreating back. By evening, the sting of the exchange still burned. Agatha slumped in her armchair, a glass of wine at her elbow, and Hodge curled on the rug, pretending not to notice her misery. She stroked his fur absently, muttering, "She started it." Hodge yawned. The phone rang. Agatha lifted the receiver with a sigh. "Yes?" Bill Wong's steady, careful voice answered. "Agatha, I'm afraid there's news. It's Petunia Blatherwick." Her spine straightened. "What about her?" She's dead. Bill paused. I'm coming round. Agatha set the phone down slowly. Dead? She took a small sip of wine, mind racing. Petunia had been alive, annoyingly alive, only hours earlier. Agatha glanced at Hodge. Typical, she murmured. The moment someone insults me, they drop dead. Half the Cotswolds will be trembling. Bill arrived 10 minutes later, notepad in hand. His expression wore a careful neutrality that made Agatha want to smack him. Mind if I ask a few questions? Mind? Of course I mind, she snapped. Come in. He stepped inside, glancing at Hodge, who responded with regal indifference. Bill sat on the edge of the armchair, choosing the spot farthest from crumbs and magazines. Petunia was found in her sitting room, face frozen, more than usual. Agatha raised an eyebrow. Botox mishap? We don't think so. There's something unusual about it. We'll know more once the doctor's had a look. Bill hesitated. People mentioned you had words with her today. Agatha bristled. Words are not weapons, Bill, unless you include Petunia's. Still, Bill said gently, it would help if you told me everything. Agatha recounted the WI scene, trying to sound restrained. She might have added a few unnecessary details about Petunia's rudeness. Bill listened, scribbling occasionally, nodding with maddening patience. Thank you, he said at last. We're interviewing others, of course, but some villagers think... That I killed her, Agatha barked. Honestly, Bill, I've been accused of worse things, usually by critics. Bill gave her a sympathetic half-smile. I don't think you did it, Agatha, but people gossip. They'd gossip about God if he bought the wrong scone, Agatha muttered. Bill rose. We'll sort this out. Just stay available. She saw him to the door, chin high. When it closed, she sagged against it. Petunia Blatherwick, dead. And Agatha, the last person to quarrel with her, practically delivered the motive on a silver platter. She wandered back to the armchair, drained the last sip of wine, and scratched Hodge behind the ear. Right, she said, voice firming. If they think I'm going to sit back while they paint me as a murderer, they're mad. I'll find out what really killed her, and whether Botox can truly be an alibi. Hodge blinked slowly, as if endorsing the plan, or as if demanding supper. Possibly both. Agatha straightened. Fire rekindled. Tomorrow, she would investigate. Petunia might have left this world with a face smoother than a frozen pond, but Agatha Raisin would uncover the truth beneath it, even if she had to fight every wrinkle of village gossip to do so. Carsley greeted the next morning with a soft, pearly light that made the village look deceptively innocent. Agatha Raisin stared out of her bedroom window, arms folded, watching a pair of sparrows quarrel atop the hedge. Even the wildlife seemed determined to remind her of yesterday's humiliation. Hodge stretched across the duvet, blinking at her with the lazy indifference of a creature who had no intention of worrying about murder. Agatha muttered, "Must be nice to have no reputation to destroy." Hodge rolled onto his side, presenting his back. Typical male. By the time Agatha marched toward the WI hall, the village lanes were chattering. She caught fragments as she passed. Terrible business. And Botox gone wrong, surely. And, most irritatingly, well, Mrs. Raisin did shout at her. Agatha lengthened her stride. The WI hall buzzed like a disturbed hive. Women crowded around tables stacked with fate committee paperwork, wool for bunting, and half-eaten biscuits. The air smelled of floor polish and rising scandal. Doris Simpson's voice carried above the rest. And then she said... Doris paused dramatically as Agatha entered, then continued louder. That Petunia's face was pumped with something cheap. Imagine, poor woman. Agatha's cheeks burned. I did not say poor woman. A flutter of interest rippled across the room. Several ladies stopped unravelling ribbons. A few leaned forward, delighted. Agatha lifted her chin. I simply remarked, privately mind you, that Petunia's new face looked over-ambitious. Over-ambitious, Mrs. Greeley repeated, eyes bulging. She looked like a startled trout. Laughter broke out, and Agatha, despite the tension knotting her stomach, felt a petty trickle of relief. At least someone saw reason. But Doris was relentless. Bill Wong said it wasn't the injections at all, she announced. Said it looked suspicious. Agatha stared. Bill said that? Oh yes, Doris said, puffed with authority. Said there's a puncture mark, but not the charming kind. She lowered her voice. Could be poison. The room erupted. Mrs. Mason gasped. Injected poison, that's outrageous. Who'd do such a thing? Someone else demanded. Every head swung toward Agatha. Her mouth dropped open. Oh, for heaven's sake! I lose my temper for 2 minutes and suddenly I'm a trained assassin. Mrs. Bloxby approached, calm as always, her presence smoothing the air around her. Agatha, she said softly, perhaps you should let Bill handle the investigation. Agatha bristled. What's that supposed to mean? That I should sit quietly while the village paints me as a villain? Not at all, Mrs. Bloxby said with mild patience, only that you have a tendency to leap. I do not leap, Agatha snapped. I stride with purpose. Before Mrs. Bloxby could reply, the hall door swung open and Charles Fraith strolled in, as if arriving at a garden party rather than a brewing social riot. He wore a tweed coat that managed to look both effortless and smug. Agatha, darling, he drawled, I hear you've terrorized yet another Carsley resident. Really, you must pace yourself. Agatha glared at him. Petunia Blatherwick was already insufferable. I merely pointed it out. Charles looked delighted. I adore you when you're haughty. Do carry on. Agatha was torn between gratitude and the desire to whack him with a roll of bunting. The chatter dipped as Bill Wong himself appeared in the doorway, wearing the patient, long-suffering expression he reserved exclusively for Agatha's involvement in homicide. He carried a folder tucked under his arm. Ladies, Bill greeted. Then, spotting Agatha, he sighed almost imperceptibly. A word? He led her outside into the crisp, mid-morning air. Frost still clung to the grass in pale patches, and the village church bell gave a distant, solemn note. Right, Agatha said, arms folded. Let's have it. Am I being arrested for gossiping? Bill kept his tone neutral. Nobody's arresting anyone, but you were the last person seen arguing with Petunia. She started it, Agatha muttered, waltzing in with that ridiculous face. The post-mortem started, Bill said. There's early suspicion she was poisoned. Agatha blinked. Not a Botox mishap? No. There was a puncture mark on her upper arm. Could be cosmetic. Could be something else. The doctor couldn't confirm. Agatha's irritation shifted into a familiar, invigorating curiosity. What about people she saw yesterday? We're checking. Bill hesitated. Do you remember her mentioning anyone, or anything unusual? Agatha considered. She remembered Petunia's swagger, her smirk, the faint chemical gleam of her forehead, and something else, the WI ladies gossiping about a visiting specialist. There was talk of a cosmetic consultant, she said, offering discount treatments in Mercer. Tall fellow, strange eyes. Doris mentioned him. Bill nodded. Dr. Lionel Smoot. He's on my list. He flipped open his folder. Petunia had an appointment card for the Carsley Fate Committee meeting this week, but she wasn't on the committee. Odd, don't you think? Very, Agatha agreed. Unless she planned to stir trouble. She lived for that. Bill closed the folder. Agatha, I know you want to help, but please stay out of this. Stay out? Agatha tilted her head. Have you met me? Before Bill could respond, Charles sauntered out of the hall. Everything under control? Hardly, Agatha said. The entire village is ready to cast me as the Botox butcher. Bill rubbed his temple. Nobody said, They don't need to, Agatha cut in. Their eyes do it. Charles smiled benignly. Well, if you require transportation for sleuthing purposes, I have the convertible. It could be dreadfully amusing. Bill shot him a warning look. Don't encourage her. She doesn't need encouragement, Charles replied. She needs strategy. Bill sighed. Agatha, please, just be careful. Agatha studied him. She saw concern beneath his professionalism and felt a rare flicker of affection. Fine, she said. I'll be careful, but I'm not sitting still while rumours spread faster than Doris on a free biscuit. Bill left, defeated. Charles offered his arm in mock gallantry. Agatha ignored it but walked beside him, chin high. Poisoned, she murmured. What a ridiculous way to go. Better than dying of boredom, Charles remarked. You would say that. They reached her cottage. Charles leaned against the gate. You're enjoying this, she accused. I enjoy watching you, he replied, especially when you're ruffling feathers. A blush threatened, which Agatha crushed immediately. I'm investigating to clear my name. Of course, Charles agreed lightly, and not because you love a mystery. She opened the gate with more force than necessary. I love justice. And gossip, he added. Don't forget gossip. Agatha refused to dignify that with a response. Inside, the cottage smelled faintly of last night's wine and Hodge's warm fur. The cat greeted her by jumping onto the armchair and yawning as if she'd returned from a pleasant stroll rather than a day of public character assassination. Agatha sat, exhaling slowly. She considered everything Bill had said, the puncture mark, the poisoned suspicion, the odd appointment card. Beneath her irritation, the embers of excitement stirred. A mystery always did that to her, especially one that threatened her reputation. "Poison within an hour of our argument," she told Hodge, "which means, according to Castley logic, I must have done it." Hodge blinked. She sighed. "Well, I didn't, and I'll prove it." She leaned back, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "Honestly, Hodge, I try to stay respectable. The universe refuses." Hodge stretched, unimpressed. Agatha straightened. The investigation would begin properly tomorrow. She would look into Dr. Smoot, revisit the WI gossip, examine Petunia's last movements, and, most importantly, clear her own blasted name. For now, she settled into the warm quiet of her cottage, where scandal could not reach her for at least 5 minutes, maybe 6 if she didn't answer the phone. Hodge hopped into her lap, his weight solid, grounding. Agatha stroked him, feeling a flicker of peace. "At least you don't think I'm a murderer," she murmured. Hodge purred, or possibly grumbled. Hard to tell with cats. Agatha let out a slow breath. "Right then, tomorrow. Suspect number 1, am I? We'll see about that." And with that, the village's most determined amateur sleuth closed her eyes for a moment, already plotting her next move. A crisp, windy morning swept through Castley, sending the last of the autumn leaves skittering across Agatha Raisin's garden path like frantic messengers. It suited her mood, edgy, determined, and faintly irritated that she had not yet solved a murder the police had barely begun to investigate. She stood by her gate, adjusting her scarf and surveying the village with the sharp eye of someone fully prepared to interrogate it. Hodge sat inside the window, tail switching with disapproval at her early start. "You're not coming," she told him. "Detective work requires brains, not naps." Hodge yawned in response. Agatha set off toward her car, heels clicking a rhythm of purpose. The wind tugged at her coat, but she pressed on, lighting a cigarette with the stubborn flourish of a woman who refused to be cowed by weather or gossip. Today's mission was clear. Confront Dr. Lionel Smoot, the cosmetic consultant whose name had danced far too freely among village whispers. If Petunia Blatherwick had been poisoned, and a puncture mark hinted at a needle, then the man paid to puncture women professionally was a logical starting point. Mercer sat under a pale sun, its shop fronts prim and quiet. Agatha found Smoot's temporary clinic occupying a former travel agency, the peeling posters of cruise holidays forming a strangely appropriate backdrop for promises of youth and reinvention. She marched inside without knocking. Dr. Lionel Smoot looked up from behind a cluttered desk. He was a tall man with slicked hair, an oily smile, and a suit that tried too hard to look expensive. His eyes darted nervously as Agatha approached. "Good morning," he said, voice smooth in the way of men accustomed to calming women before charging them. "I don't believe we have an appointment." "We don't," Agatha said, tapping ash into the nearest bin. "I'm here to talk about Petunia Blatherwick." Smoot froze, his smile twitching. "Oh, terrible business. Such a tragedy for the community." "You barely know the community," Agatha said. "But you knew her. She came here for injections." He cleared his throat. "She may have sought a consultation. As a professional, I must protect client confidentiality." "She's dead," Agatha said bluntly. "Confidentiality becomes pointless when the client can't complain." Smoot winced. "I assure you, Mrs. Blatherwick begged, absolutely begged for stronger treatments. I refused. I care deeply about ethical standards." Agatha eyed the garish certificates plastered on the wall. Most looked recently printed. "So she stormed out?" "Huffing," Smoot corrected. "Quite emotional, but alive." Agatha scanned the room. Something felt off. Too clean, too arranged, like a stage set before the actors arrived. A faint chemical scent hung in the air. She moved toward a bin in the corner. "Mind if I look?" "Yes," he said quickly. "Medical waste, very unsafe." Agatha ignored him. She nudged the bin with her foot. A few scratched vials sat at the bottom, labels half peeled. Interesting, she murmured. Smoot blanched. Discarded samples, absolutely harmless. Agatha gave him a long, assessing stare. Nothing about this place feels harmless. She left without waiting for his sputtered farewell, convinced the man was hiding something. Men in flashy suits usually did. Back in Carsley, the village hummed with anxious energy. Drizzle had started, a fine, reluctant mist that softened rooftops and made the hedges shimmer. Agatha headed straight for the shop, where Doris Simpson stood stocking tins with a proprietary air. "Back so soon?" Doris asked, eyes gleaming. "Any news?" Agatha lowered her voice. "Tell me about Petunia's miracle youth treatment." Doris's eyebrows leapt. "Ah," she went on and on about it. Claimed she'd found someone better than that Mercer man. Said it would revolutionize the Cotswolds. "Who was it?" Agatha pressed. She wouldn't say. Planned to announce it at the fate meeting. Some secret competition or exclusive offer. She was smug as a cat with cream. Agatha frowned. That didn't align with Smoot's story. Petunia had been working both sides, boasting about a miracle treatment but still visiting the consultant. Suspicious behaviour for a woman whose face already looked stretched to capacity. Mrs. Bloxby emerged from behind a stack of birthday cards, offering her gentle smile. "Agatha, dear, I remembered something. Petunia mentioned having a heated argument with Betsy Dimple last week." "The salon woman," Agatha said. "The one who thinks a mud wrap can cure marital problems." Mrs. Bloxby chuckled softly. "The very one. Apparently Petunia accused her of running a prehistoric salon. Betsy was not pleased. A promising feud, one for the mental notes." Agatha thanked them and headed to the Red Lion for further intelligence. Inside, warmth and beer fumes wrapped around her like a comforting, slightly sticky blanket. The usual crowd occupied the bar, and conversation halted the moment she appeared. "Oh, it's just Agatha," grumbled Mr. Jessup. "We thought it were the police." "You're safe," Agatha said. "I'm only here for gossip." A few relieved chuckles. She bought a half pint, partly to loosen tongues and partly because she needed something to steady her temper. "What do we know about George Blatherwick?" she asked, leaning casually on the bar. "Nasty shock for him," someone said. "Didn't look shocked," Mr. Jessup chimed in. "More like relieved." Agatha raised her eyebrows. "Relieved?" "Came into the DIY shop in Evesham yesterday," said another voice. "Made a fuss over a faulty drill. Loud as anything. Definitely there around the time she popped off." An alibi, then. Loud and inconvenient, but seemingly reliable. Still, relief at one's spouse's death wasn't promising. She made another mental note. On her way home, Agatha felt the drizzle thicken, dampening her hair and mood. Carsley's cottages glowed softly behind fogged windows, the sort of reassuring domesticity she resented when she lacked answers. Inside her own cottage, she collapsed onto a chair. Hodge sauntered over, demanding attention. She obliged, scratching behind his ears while her mind raced. Petunia had lied about the timing of something. Agatha remembered the fate appointment card Bill had shown her. She fetched her handbag, rummaging until she found the photograph of the card she'd taken in a fit of thoroughness. She studied the handwriting. The time read 5:30, large and slanted, but something felt wrong, too neat, too deliberate. Agatha fetched a magnifying glass. Under close inspection, faint indentations appeared above the written time, as if someone had written something earlier and erased it. She angled the card toward the lamp. There, the faint outline of a different number beneath. 4 o'clock. Her breath caught. A secret meeting. Petunia had arranged something before the fate committee, something she hadn't wanted known. "Who were you meeting, Petunia?" Agatha whispered. Hodge purred, uninterested. A new lead. A critical discrepancy. Agatha leaned back, eyes narrowing with satisfaction. Beneath the gossip and glamour, Petunia Blatherwick had been hiding something, and someone else in Carsley knew exactly what it was. Agatha would find them. Tomorrow the village would yield another crack. It always did. The afternoon sun slanted across Carsley with an almost theatrical softness, as if determined to reassure everyone that village life remained charming despite recent events. Agatha Raisin suspected the weather of mocking her. She marched along the pavement toward the W.I. Hall, her heels clicking decisively. She had spent most of the morning revisiting Petunia Blatherwick's appointment card, the mysterious half-erased time flickering in her mind like an accusation. If Petunia had met someone at 4 o'clock, the village would know who. Carsley always knew everyone's business, whether or not everyone wanted it known. A soft breeze carried the scent of manure from a nearby field. Agatha wrinkled her nose. "Romantic countryside, my foot," she muttered. The WI hall stood ahead, quiet now, its whitewashed walls gleaming in the sunlight. She circled behind it and paused. The patch of grass behind the hall was usually reserved for smokers and scandalous conversations. Today it held something else, the faint trace of expensive men's cologne drifting on the air. Agatha inhaled, not a village scent, something urban, sharp and faintly arrogant. She crouched, regretting her choice of skirt, and studied the ground. A few disturbed patches of earth, a slight scuff on the wall. Someone had stood here recently, arguing by the sound of it, according to the whisper she'd heard this morning. A witness had reported raised voices behind the WI hall on the day Petunia died, but the witness had been too flustered to identify the second person. Agatha rose, brushing imaginary dirt from her coat. Whoever it was had worn an expensive cologne. That narrowed the list. Not many castly men could afford such foolish luxury. Her first stop was Betsy Dimple, owner of the local beauty salon, a small woman with a sharp jaw and a sharper voice. The salon smelled of lavender and ambition. Betsy regarded Agatha with suspicion, as if expecting her to demand a disastrous perm. "If this is about Petunia," she said before Agatha could speak, "I've nothing to hide." "You two didn't get on," Agatha began. Betsy snorted. "She thought she was God's gift to moisturizer. Walked in here once and declared my treatments were outdated. Outdated! She looked like a startled owl after her last injection." Agatha allowed herself a small smirk. "Did you argue with her recently?" "Of course I did," Betsy snapped. "I argued with her often. She enjoyed provoking people. She was a menace with lipstick. But I didn't kill her, if that's what you're circling around." "Someone saw her arguing behind the WI hall," Agatha pressed. Betsy folded her arms. "Not me. I was giving Mrs. Fowler a pedicure, a thankless task. But I'll tell you something useful." Her eyes gleamed. "Petunia was blackmailing someone." Agatha stiffened. "Blackmail?" "Oh yes. She bragged about it. Said she had leverage over a Castley resident. Wouldn't say who. Loved the power of it. Honestly, I'm amazed she lasted this long." Agatha left the salon with more questions than answers. The breeze had picked up again, carrying the faintest hint of cologne, or perhaps she was imagining it now. She turned toward home, mind buzzing. Blackmail opened an entirely new avenue. Petunia had been secretive, boastful, and far too pleased with herself recently. What did she know? And whom had she threatened? Back at her cottage, the comforting smell of tea and last night's fire greeted her, and Hodge prowled around her ankles in welcome mixed with expectation. Yes, Agatha said, scratching his chin. "Food soon." She was reaching for the kettle when her front door burst open with the force of a dramatic entrance. "Darling Aggie," Roy Silver cried, flinging his arms wide as if expecting applause. He was dressed in flamboyant London fashion, his scarf trailing dangerously close to Hodge's tail. "Have you missed me?" "I didn't order theatrical performances today," Agatha said, though she couldn't help a reluctant smile. Roy always arrived like a gust of glittering wind, unsettling but oddly comforting. "I bring news," Roy said grandly. "Fresh gossip from the train." Agatha waved him toward the kitchen table. "Sit down. Tell me everything." "Why tear it? Why hide it?" "We're cross-referencing anyone with access to specialized substances," Bill continued. "But be cautious, Agatha. Don't push too far." "When have I ever pushed too far?" she asked. Bill raised an eyebrow. Roy snorted into his tea. As Bill left, Agatha sank into her chair, staring at the torn scrap. Just sun. The village was filled with suns, but not all had motive or opportunity. She considered the cologne, the secret appointment at 4, the blackmail. Petunia had held something over a Castley man, something powerful enough to make him cry, something someone might kill to keep hidden. Hodge hopped onto the table, sniffing the evidence bag with disdain. Agatha stroked his fur, mind racing. "Who were you meeting, Petunia, and why tear the name?" The cottage felt warm, the late afternoon light casting soft shadows across the floor. Outside, the village hummed quietly, unaware, or pretending to be, that one of its own had spun a web of secrets. Agatha leaned back, letting a wry smile creep across her lips. "Well," she whispered, "someone in Castley is lying. And I'm going to find out who. Hodge stretched, unimpressed but loyal. A mystery was unfolding, and Agatha Raisin, for better or worse, was now right at its centre. A pale, brittle sunlight hung over Castley the next morning, giving the village an overly polite glow, like a hostess smiling too brightly after burning the scones. Agatha Raisin stood at her cottage window, arms folded, staring at the frost-edged hedges. She felt prickly and impatient. Hodge sat on the armchair, tail twitching, sensing the storm brewing in her. He usually ignored human drama, but Agatha's mood was hard to miss. "Yes, I'm in a temper," she told him, "and yes, it's justified." Hodge blinked, which she chose to interpret as solidarity. She grabbed her coat and strode toward Charles Frayth's manor. The earlier clue, Petunia's torn scrap with "son," had nagged at her all night. Doris Simpson, Graham Dobson, and Charles Frayth, whose surname ended with a smug "theth," not "son," but Charles had a talent for inserting himself into trouble, even when linguistically exempt. And his face had definitely tightened when she mentioned the secret meeting behind the WI hall. Charles greeted her at his doorway with the sort of lazy charm that suggested he'd been expecting drama and was grateful it had arrived on schedule. "Agatha, darling, you look like a woman ready to interrogate a small nation." "I just need a word," Agatha said, brushing past him. "Help yourself," he said, closing the door. "Would you like tea?" "No," Agatha snapped. "I'd like honesty." Charles raised his eyebrows. Dangerous request. She pulled the evidence scrap from her pocket. "What do you know about this?" "About a torn bit of paper," he asked lightly. "About Petunia writing, 'son.'" Agatha narrowed her eyes. "Your face twitched yesterday when I mentioned her 4 o'clock meeting." Charles sighed, walking toward the fireplace with the air of a man unfairly burdened by reality. "If you must know, Petunia once attempted to flirt with me." Agatha rolled her eyes. "Of course she did." "I rejected her," Charles continued. "She threw a canapé at me." "Reasonable reaction," Agatha said. "But what does that have to do with the meeting?" "Nothing," Charles said. "I barely spoke to her since. She was tiresome, all compliments and claws." "Claws could be motive." Charles gave her a patient look. "Agatha, if I killed every woman who annoyed me, the Cotswolds would be a barren wasteland." Agatha wanted to argue, but she couldn't deny his tone was convincing. Still, something was off. He was too dismissive, too carefully casual. She folded her arms. "Are you sure there's nothing else?" "Quite sure," Charles said. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "She may have sent me a note a week ago." Agatha pounced. "What sort of note?" "An invitation," he said. "Private demonstration of some exclusive rejuvenation technique. I assumed she wanted another attempt at flirting, so I ignored it." "Where is the note?" Charles hesitated. "In the bin." Agatha groaned. "You aristocrats treat evidence like potato peelings." "If the police need it, they know where my bin is," Charles said. "But for what it's worth, I never went." Agatha wasn't sure she believed him. His evasiveness was thick enough to spread on toast. At that moment, the front door burst open without knocking. Only one man entered houses that way. "Aggie," Roy Silver sang cheerfully, sweeping in like a gust of confetti. "I've booked time off and brought my best scarf. We're sleuthing today." "I didn't ask you to sleuth," Agatha said. "You never ask," Roy said. "You just pout until I volunteer." He flung himself into Charles's armchair. "So then, who's guilty?" "Everyone," Agatha muttered. "But we're going to Mercer. Petunia withdrew large sums recently, and I want to know why." Roy clapped his hands. "A bank heist. I knew this case needed glamour." Charles, relieved to be temporarily dismissed, waved them out. "Try not to implicate me while you're gone." "Stop acting suspicious, and I won't," Agatha shot back. The drive to Mercer was brisk, cold, and filled with Roy's enthusiastic theories. "Blackmail," he insisted. "It's the only reason anyone takes out cash. Well, that or buying a secret pony." "She wasn't buying a pony," Agatha said. "You don't know that," Roy replied. "She had the personality of a horsey woman." At the bank, Agatha used every ounce of charm she didn't have, relying mostly on intimidation and the universal fear bankers had of troublesome customers. Eventually, she learned that Petunia had made multiple large cash withdrawals over the last month. Regular amounts, carefully timed. "Payments," Agatha murmured. "She was paying someone." "Or funding a lover," Roy whispered dramatically. She didn't have a lover, Agatha said. Everyone has a lover somewhere, Roy replied. Even you. Agatha glared at him. I'm ignoring that. They left the bank and wandered down the Mercer High Street, questioning shopkeepers. Most had little to offer until they reached a newsagent, where the owner perked up at the mention of Petunia. Oh yes, he said. Saw her arguing with Graham Dobson last week. Loud as anything. Something about numbers and promises. Agatha felt the spark of a lead. Graham Dobson, fate treasurer, nervous as a pigeon, surname ending with son. She dragged Roy back to the car. We're visiting Graham. Ooh, confrontation, Roy said. My favourite. Graham Dobson lived in a neat, anxious-looking bungalow. He opened the door with the expression of a man terrified of visitors and life itself. Mrs. Raisin? He squeaked. Agatha pushed her way inside. You argued with Petunia Blatherwick. Graham blanched. She caught me. Caught you doing what? He wrung his hands. Falsifying some fate accounts. Nothing serious. Just a little misplacement of funds. I paid her back immediately. Did she threaten you? Of course she did, Graham wailed. She loved threatening people. She said she'd expose me, but then she took the money and said she'd forget it. Did you meet her yesterday? No, Graham cried. I swear. I've got a witness. I was delivering leaflets with Mrs. Tanner. He seemed genuinely terrified. Agatha softened slightly. Graham Dobson didn't have the nerve to kill a spider, much less a person. As they left, Roy whispered, boring man, definitely innocent. Probably, Agatha admitted, but the blackmail angle is growing. They returned to Carsley and found Bill Wong waiting on her doorstep, holding a file. Agatha, he said, I've got new results. Let me guess, Agatha replied. More bad news? Depends, Bill said. The puncture mark on Petunia's arm wasn't related to the toxin. The injection was older than her death. Agatha frowned. So the poison didn't go in through the needle? No, Bill said. The fatal toxin entered her body another way. Drink? Food? Roy suggested. Possibly, Bill said. We're investigating. He handed Agatha a photocopy of Petunia's arm, the puncture circled. Someone tried to make it look like a cosmetic accident, but they slipped. Agatha felt a ripple of satisfaction. The killer was clever, but not clever enough. Bill warned her to stay cautious and left. Roy followed him out to steal gossip. He couldn't resist. Agatha entered her cottage with a sigh. Hodge greeted her with a mild chirp, tail curling like a question mark. I'm getting closer, she told him. Whoever killed Petunia wasn't sloppy. They staged things. They planned. Hodge, unimpressed by murder or deduction, leapt onto her table and promptly knocked her handbag to the floor. Hodge, Agatha cried, crouching to gather the scattered contents. Lipstick, receipts, a crushed mint, and the photograph of Petunia's appointment card, all spilled across the rug. As she picked up the card, she noticed something new. On the back, faint indentations marked the paper. Not from the erased time. These were different. Someone had written something above it, pressed hard, then torn off the top half. She held it to the lamp. A few ghostly strokes appeared, the shadow of letters, the ending of a word, maybe a name. The upper half was missing, torn clean away. Agatha felt the familiar thrill of discovery. Someone had arranged a secret meeting, erased the time, then removed the name entirely. You tore off the top to hide who you were meeting, she whispered, which means you feared being found out. Hodge meowed, impatient for dinner. Agatha stood, heart pulsing with renewed determination. Someone in Carsley, someone whose name ended with son, or someone clever enough to hide behind such a clue, had something to fear, and Agatha Raisin was about to uncover it. A dense, pearly fog settled over Carsley as evening draped itself across the village. The air felt heavy, muffling sound, softening edges, turning familiar shapes into ghostly silhouettes. Agatha Raisin stood at her kitchen table, cards spread before her, pencil in hand. She shaded gently, breath held. Slowly, faint lines emerged, indentations pressed long before someone tore the top half away. There it was. B. Dimple, 4 p.m. Bring photos. Agatha sat back, pulse quickening. Betsy Dimple, the salon owner? She'd denied meeting Petunia. She'd been firm about it. Too firm. Hodge jumped onto the table and sat squarely on the evidence. Move, Agatha told him. Hodge refused. She sighed, lifting him like an oversized loaf of bread and placing him beside the teapot. He glared in offended silence. "Oh, hush. You can judge me later," Agatha said, grabbing her coat. Betsy Dimple answered the door with the expression of a woman who already regretted doing so. "Mrs. Raisin," she said flatly, "do I owe you money?" "No," Agatha replied, "but you owe me honesty." She held up the card. "Why did Petunia write your name?" Betsy's eyes widened, then narrowed. "I didn't set any meeting. She forged my name. She did it before, you know. Said it made things look official. She probably wanted to lure someone." "Whom?" Agatha demanded. "How would I know?" Betsy snapped. "Petunia spent her final weeks meddling like a wasp at a picnic. And stop waving that card at me, it's not mine." Agatha studied her face. Betsy was lying about something, but not about the card. Her outrage seemed far too genuine for performance. Dimple was sharp, but not subtle. She lacked the finesse required for covert blackmail or elaborate forgery. "Did she ever mention a Botox party?" Agatha asked suddenly. Betsy blinked. "Oh, that nonsense. Yes, she planned one. Invited half the WI, then cancelled without explanation. Said the timing wasn't right. I assumed she'd run out of serum or scents." "Why cancel?" Agatha pressed. "Ask the dead woman," Betsy said, folding her arms. "Some of us have real work to do." With that, she closed the door. Agatha stood on the step, staring into the fog. A Botox party. Cancelled at the last minute. Petunia preparing to reveal something at the fate meeting, and a forged meeting arranged for 4 o'clock. Too many strands dangling, waiting to be knotted. She headed back toward the village centre, the fog curling around her like an unwelcome shawl. Lamps glowed faintly through the mist, making Castley look softer, gentler than it felt. Agatha cut across the green toward the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby would know something. She always did. And Agatha needed quiet wisdom to counterbalance the growing headache this murder had become. Mrs. Bloxby opened her door, warm lamplight spilling into the fog. "Agatha," she said in her soothing voice, "you look troubled." "I am troubled," Agatha replied, stepping inside. The vicar's wife led her into the cosy sitting room where the kettle hummed on a tray. The scent of citrus cake filled the air, a welcome balm. "Tea?" Mrs. Bloxby offered. "Please," Agatha said, sinking into the softest armchair known to humankind. Mrs. Bloxby poured with her usual grace, then sat opposite. "What's happened?" "Petunia forged Betsy's name to arrange a secret meeting," Agatha said, "and she had a hidden appointment at 4 the day she died. She was planning a Botox party too, then mysteriously cancelled it. And someone, one of our villagers, was afraid of whatever she was planning to reveal." Mrs. Bloxby's expression shifted, still serene, but something tightened at the edges. "Agatha," she said gently, "you must promise not to pry too deeply into people's private affairs." Agatha sat up straight. "Why not? Something dangerous is going on." "Because," Mrs. Bloxby replied, voice firmer than usual, "Petunia was reckless. She enjoyed holding secrets over others. Some villagers. Some had confided in her, things they now regret." "Such as?" Agatha pressed. "I can't say." Mrs. Bloxby shook her head. "And you should not ask. People have vulnerabilities, Agatha. Not everyone can face public humiliation." Agatha bristled. "I've faced it every other week." "Yes," Mrs. Bloxby said softly, "but you are braver than most." The compliment disarmed her. She stared into her tea, discomfort growing. Something had seriously rattled Mrs. Bloxby, more than Petunia's death, but pushing further would get her nowhere. Mrs. Bloxby had a spine of quiet steel. Agatha thanked her and stepped back into the fog, mood unsettled. She was halfway home when she heard footsteps charging up the lane. Roy Silver burst from the mist like a brightly wrapped parcel. "Aggie," he cried, coat flapping, "I have mind-blowing, hair-curling, absolutely scandalous news." "Walk," Agatha commanded. Roy trotted beside her, breathless with excitement. "I traced a gossip chain, you won't believe it. Petunia had photographs, real ones, of a Castley man receiving cosmetic injections." Agatha stopped dead. "Injections? Here? Which man?" "That's the best part," Roy said, eyes glittering. "Nobody knows. But an older woman at Morton Station overheard Petunia boasting about evidence. She said a single picture could bring a Castley man to tears." Agatha's pulse quickened. Photographs, a Botox party, a cancelled plan, blackmail, A secret 4 o'clock meeting. The threads twisted tighter. Was Charles involved? She muttered. Possibly, Roy said. He is vain enough to get injections. He is not, Agatha snapped, then immediately regretted defending him. Darling, Roy said, he moisturizes more than I do. Agatha continued home without answering. Inside her cottage, Hodge greeted her with a chirp. Roy followed her into the living room, still vibrating with theatrical tension. Right, Agatha said, pulling out the small evidence bag Bill had given her earlier. Petunia was hiding something, and people hide things in wardrobes. Fashion crimes, Roy suggested. Secrets, Agatha corrected. She marched into the bedroom, flung open the wardrobe and scanned the shelves. Clothes, shoes, dust, nothing suspicious. But on the top shelf, tucked behind a shoebox, she spotted something black. She pulled it down. A camera. An old one, chunky, still warm from the cottage's heating. Roy gasped. Her camera? Has to be, Agatha murmured. She flicked it open. The last photo was corrupted, half grey with static. But the visible half showed a man's sleeve, a crisp shirt cuff, and a wrist wearing an expensive watch. A cracked clasp, distinctive and deliberate. She felt a jolt. Charles owned a watch like that, but so did half the businessmen in Mercer. Well, well, Roy breathed, our mystery man has taste. Agatha's mind churned. Petunia had photographed someone receiving injections, or preparing to, but not Smoot. He wouldn't risk being photographed. So who else had access to Botox? Or pretended to? She was still staring when the doorbell rang. She and Roy exchanged a look. Hodge growled softly, his tail puffing. Agatha hurried to the hall and opened the door. Bill Wong stood there, raincoat beaded with mist. His expression told her everything before he spoke. Agatha, he said quietly, Petunia didn't die in her home. Agatha felt her breath hitch. What? The lab confirmed it. She was poisoned elsewhere. Someone moved her body and staged the scene to look like she died after a cosmetic injection. Roy gasped so dramatically that Bill actually jumped. Agatha steadied herself against the doorframe. You mean the killer transported her? Yes, Bill said, and very carefully. No dragging marks, no fibres. Someone planned this. Agatha stared past him into the fog, heart pounding. Everything she thought she knew had shifted. This wasn't a crime of impulse. It was organized, cold, and it pointed to someone far more capable than she'd imagined. Behind her, Hodge wandered into the hall, rubbed against her ankle and looked up with calm, feline certainty. Agatha took a slow breath. All right, she whispered. So the killer staged everything. Then we find the stagehand. Hodge blinked. Roy shivered with excitement, and Agatha Raisin stepped fully, irrevocably, into the heart of the mystery. A thin, needling drizzle greeted Agatha Raisin the next morning, the sort of rain that pretended it wasn't serious while soaking everything anyway. She stepped outside, muttering darkly, and pulled her coat close. The cold crept along her collarbones. Marvellous, she grumbled. Just what a woman needs when solving murder, wet hair and self-pity. Hodge sat in the window, unimpressed, as if observing her with feline resignation. She shook her head at him and marched down the lane. Today she meant to reconstruct Petunia Blatherwick's final hours. The new revelation that Petunia hadn't died at home had rewired everything. She had been poisoned elsewhere, moved like inconvenient luggage, and arranged into a cosmetic tableau. Whoever did it wasn't panicking. They were strategic. Agatha began with the 4 p.m. clue. If the toxin acted within minutes, Petunia had died shortly after that meeting. Someone in Carsley had met her at 4. Someone who feared being exposed. Her first stop was the Blatherwick house. George Blatherwick answered the door with the defeated expression of a man who had expected a casserole, and instead found Agatha Raisin. He wore a worn jumper and slippers flattened with despair. What now? He asked. I need to ask you about yesterday afternoon. George gestured her inside without enthusiasm. The house felt strangely empty without Petunia, quieter, less perfumed, less hostile. Agatha perched on the edge of the sofa. George, she said, I need the truth this time. Did you see Petunia yesterday between 4 and 5? George rubbed his face with both hands. No. You argued, Agatha said. People heard. We always argued, he said tiredly. She shouted, I sulked, life went on. But yesterday? He hesitated, then slumped. She came home earlier complaining about someone in the village, said she'd end him if he didn't cooperate. I didn't ask who, never made sense to get involved. Did she leave again? Agatha pressed. Yes, said she had business at 4. I thought she was going to the Fate Hall to stir more trouble. Agatha narrowed her eyes. You didn't follow her? God, no. I took the chance to enjoy an hour of peace. His misery seemed genuine. George Blatherwick did not radiate murderous energy. He radiated the defeated helplessness of men who married the wrong woman and then tried to survive it with biscuits. Did you ever receive cosmetic injections? Agatha asked bluntly. George blinked. Do I look like a man who enjoys unnecessary pain? She had to concede he didn't. Still, she studied him a moment longer, then left with more sympathy than she cared to admit. The drizzle thickened as she walked toward Charles Fraith's manor. Charles had evaded long enough. His evasiveness, his twitching, his expensive watch, it all circled back like an annoying boomerang. She knocked firmly. He opened the door with a towel around his neck and the air of a man in mid-shave. Agatha, he sighed. I'm not even dressed yet. Good, she said, stepping inside. You can't run. I wasn't planning to, he said mildly. Agatha crossed her arms. You lied to me. Only partially, he said, and only for my own dignity. Charles, he raised a hand. Fine. Yes, I visited Petunia last week. Agatha's eyebrows nearly flew off her forehead. You what? Charles trudged toward the drawing room. She wrote to me, claiming to have something I needed to see. I suspected a flirtation attempt, but curiosity won. When I arrived, she had photographs. Agatha sank onto a chair. Photographs of what? Charles looked pained. Me? At that spa demonstration I attended last spring. I foolishly agreed to model for a non-invasive rejuvenation procedure. Someone took photos. I had no idea until she waved them at me like trophies. Said she'd show the entire WI unless I... He cleared his throat. Supported her fundraiser. Agatha barked a laugh. Your vanity finally caught up with you. He glared. She exaggerated everything, made the whole thing sound sordid. So what happened? I refused, Charles said. Told her to do her worst. Then I walked out. She called after me, something about having other men in line. I assumed she was bluffing. But, did you meet her yesterday at 4? Charles straightened. Absolutely not. Agatha studied him closely. His voice held conviction, but guilt flickered beneath his charm. Whether guilt of involvement or embarrassment, she couldn't yet tell. Before she could push further, the doorbell rang. Charles sighed. If that's Roy again, tell him I'm not donating to his new Agatha's Glamour Squad scheme. Agatha opened the door and nearly tripped over Roy, who swept inside holding a notebook. Aggie, Charles, you won't believe this. That pathetic little pigeon Graham Dobson lied. Agatha groaned. Oh, what now? He did meet Petunia yesterday, Roy said triumphantly, behind the WI hall. I spoke to Mrs. Tanner. She admitted she didn't see him until 4:30, which means our Graham saw Petunia shortly before she died. Charles whistled. A dramatic turn. He claims she was alive and shrieking when he left, Roy continued. Said she threatened to report his embezzlement to Bill. He begged her to stop, but she marched off furious. Agatha absorbed this. That means she left the WI hall alive, and someone else intercepted her. At 4:00, Roy said. Which brings us back to the mystery man, Charles muttered. Agatha rubbed her forehead. Graham might be a coward, but poison required nerve, and planning, and access. She and Roy returned to her cottage, the drizzle now a soft patter on the hedges. Hodge greeted them with a pointed meow, the universal feline criticism for lateness. Agatha threw her coat over a chair. Roy, Graham Dobson isn't a killer. No, Roy agreed, but he's excellent supporting drama. Agatha paced. Smoot claimed his toxin supply was intact, but Bill said the compound used is restricted. Someone either stole it or bought it illegally. Could Petunia have stolen it? Roy offered. She could barely operate a microwave, Agatha said. Roy tapped his notebook. So, who has access? Smoot, a medical supplier, or someone clever enough to fake credentials? Agatha froze mid-step. The toxin acted within minutes. Bill said so. Meaning? Roy prompted. Meaning Petunia must have died in the 4:00 meeting, Agatha said slowly. Not later. She met someone privately, drank or ate something, collapsed, and the killer transported her home. Roy shuddered. Creepy. Logical, Agatha corrected. Now who had no alibi at 4? Roy flipped pages. Graham, sort of. Charles, iffy. George, claims he was at home. Smoot, at his clinic, allegedly. And the mysterious injected man. Agatha's mind flickered to the corrupted photograph. The sleeve, the watch clasp. Cracked and distinctive. Charles's watch had a crack, but so did others. She needed certainty. Roy, she said suddenly, we're going to confront Charles again. But he just shaved, Roy protested. All the better, she replied. They returned to Fraith Manor. Charles opened the door with a sigh. Again? Agatha leaned in. Your watch. What about it? Charles asked. Show me, she demanded. Charles rolled his eyes but extended his wrist. The clasp had a crack, but not the same angle or depth as the one in the photograph. Agatha felt heat rise in her cheeks. She'd been ready to pounce. Too ready. Satisfied? Charles asked dryly. For now, Agatha muttered. She and Roy returned home, deflated but thinking. Inside, Agatha dropped into her armchair. Hodge hopped onto her lap, kneading once before curling into a loaf-like ball. There's something we're missing, she murmured. Someone slipped poison into her drink. Someone she trusted enough to meet privately. Roy sank onto the sofa, doodling a dramatic caricature of Petunia with devil horns. Whoever it is, they're cool as ice, Agatha nodded. And careful, moving a body isn't easy. Roy gasped. Unless the killer had help. Or a car with boot space, Agatha replied. She reached for Petunia's torn appointment card again. The faint indentations beneath the erased time. The forged meeting. The manufactured clues. One name floated to the surface of her mind. Someone she hadn't properly interrogated yet. Someone with vanity, opportunity, access to toxins, a collapsed alibi. Someone who lived in Mercer. Someone who had both the skill and the fear to carry out an elaborate staging. Roy, Agatha whispered, eyes widening. It wasn't a man hiding Botox. It was a man hiding misconduct. Oh, Roy breathed. Smoot. Agatha stood so quickly Hodge toppled onto the rug with a disgruntled chirp. The toxin, the timing, the meeting, it all fits. Smoot claimed a theft but can't prove it. He was desperate enough to kill. Roy clapped his hands. Aggie, you've cracked it. Not yet, Agatha said, but I'm close. She looked down at Hodge. He blinked back with calm certainty, tail curling like punctuation on her thought. Petunia died at 4, Agatha whispered, and only one man has no alibi, and everything to lose. The village lay quiet outside her window, unaware that the final threads of the mystery had begun to weave themselves together. And Agatha Raisin, stubborn, vain, brave and determined, was ready to pull every last strand tight. A crisp, bright sky stretched over Castley the next morning, blue as polished crockery and just as deceptive. Sunshine in the Cotswolds always suggested calm, but Agatha Raisin knew better than to trust it. Murder still stalked the lanes, and she had not slept well. She moved about her cottage with restless energy, pacing like a thwarted general. Hodge followed her briefly, then decided her agitation was too exhausting, and settled on the sofa with his back turned in protest. Agatha ignored the insult. Her mind was fixed on the puzzle. She spread the evidence across her kitchen table. Petunia's torn appointment card, the corrupted photograph, her scribbled notes, and Bill's lab information. All the threads she had collected over days were finally beginning to tug in the same direction. Petunia wasn't blackmailing everyone, she muttered aloud. Just one person. And she used the others as smoke. She tapped the card. The forged meeting with Betsy, the cancelled Botox party, the lies about 4 o'clock. It was all camouflage. She paced again, chewing on her lower lip. Petunia was loud enough to make her threats believable, but selective enough to make them dangerous. Roy, arriving without knocking, thankfully holding 2 pastries as peace offerings, stepped into the kitchen. Aggie, your aura looks murderous, he declared. Here, sugar carbs. I don't have an aura, Agatha snapped, snatching a pastry anyway, and if I do, it's none of your business. Roy perched on a chair. So, what's the crisis this hour? Agatha held up the corrupted photograph. The sleeve, the watch. I kept thinking Charles, but the clasp crack doesn't match. Roy leaned in. True. Charles's crack slopes left. This one slopes right. Very forensic of me. Agatha resisted the urge to swat him. She held the photo closer to the window, letting the sunlight illuminate faint details. The distortion still half obscured the image, but the reflective shine on the clasp finally caught her attention. A particular stain, a tiny nick, a worn patch on the metal. She had seen that exact wear before, on a wrist that waved in dramatic flourish, on a hand that loved to gesture, flaunting both charm and vanity. "Good Lord," she whispered. "It's Smoot." Roy blinked. "Your oily Botox goblin." "Yes," Agatha said, heart quickening. "His clasp is cracked. I noticed it when he gestured at his certificates. He kept flicking his wrist." She grabbed her coat. "He killed her." Roy gasped. "But how?" "He had access to the toxin. He claimed it was stolen. Convenient, isn't it?" Roy whistled dramatically. "Ooh, villain energy." Agatha strode out into the sunshine, determined and furious. Roy trotted behind her, scarf fluttering like a flag of theatrical anxiety. They headed straight toward Mercer, reaching Dr. Lionel Smoot's temporary clinic by late morning. The clinic occupied a converted flat above a carpet shop, its door painted an unhealthy shade of green. Agatha barged in without knocking. The waiting room was empty, save for a dusty plant and leaflets promising youth in a syringe. A radio droned softly about motorway traffic. Smoot emerged from the inner room, startled. His hair was slicked back too tightly, face glossy with overuse of his own treatments. "Mrs. Raisin," he said slowly, "this is unexpected." "Not half as unexpected as your future," Agatha replied. "Where were you at 4 o'clock the day Petunia died?" Smoot's eyes darted. "My clinic, with clients." "Which clients?" Agatha snapped. I don't recall." "Ha!" Agatha stepped closer. "You poisoned Petunia. She blackmailed you, didn't she? Found out you were operating illegally." Smoot stiffened. "I have every right." "You do not," Agatha said sharply. "Your license expired. Your supplier refused to work with you. You've been using stock purchased under a false name. Petunia discovered everything and threatened to expose you." Smoot's face twisted. "That woman was impossible. She wanted free injections for life. Said she'd ruin me otherwise." Roy leaned dramatically against the counter. "Blackmail. Very chic." Agatha ignored him. "You invited her here at 4, offered tea, she drank it. Within minutes, she collapsed. You panicked, didn't you?" Smoot's breathing grew shallow. Agatha pressed on. "You moved her body to her own home and staged the injection mark. But you miscalculated the timeline, and you didn't hide your watch." Smoot sagged. "She left me no choice." His voice cracked with self-pity. "You don't understand what scandal does to a man's reputation. One whisper, everything ruined." "You chose murder instead," Agatha demanded. "You coward!" Smoot's eyes hardened. "You can't prove any of this." "Yet," Agatha said coldly. "But I will." Smoot's lip curled. "The police need evidence, not housewife fantasies." Roy gasped, hand to chest. Oh, he did not just say housewife. Agatha stepped forward, voice low and dangerous. "Dr. Smoot, I've taken down arms dealers, fraudsters, murderers, and one homicidal baker. You think I can't handle a vain little man with a stolen toxin?" Smoot flinched. For a moment, he looked genuinely frightened. Then he tried for bravado. "You have no proof?" "Yet," Agatha repeated. "But your watch clasp will match. Your fingerprints will be on the teacup. Your bin probably contains traces of the toxin, and Petunia's camera has your wrist on it." Smoot went pale. Roy whispered, "Oh, he's crumbling beautifully." Agatha grabbed Roy's sleeve. "We're leaving, for now." They stepped out into the street. Roy bounced on his toes. "Aggie, that was spectacular. You dismantled him like cheap furniture." "It's not enough," Agatha grumbled. "He'll deny everything. We need a trap." "A trap," Roy repeated, eyes sparkling. "A trap! Oh, this is delicious." "We need him to confess," Agatha said, pacing, "or incriminate himself." "We need Charles," Roy decided. "He's good at baiting people. He does it for sport." Agatha winced. Turning to Charles felt like admitting she needed help, but she did. They drove back to Carsley. The sunshine had warmed the village, children's voices carrying from the green. It was almost peaceful. Agatha hated that murder had seeped into that piece like rot. Charles was on his front lawn wearing sunglasses entirely unnecessary for British sunlight. He lifted them when he saw her approaching. "Agatha, Roy, you look conspiratorial." "We need you," Agatha said bluntly. Charles brightened. "Well, that's rare." "Don't let it go to your head." She marched up to him. "Smoot killed Petunia. He admitted almost everything except murder." Charles blinked once. "You confronted him alone? Are you mad?" "Of course," Roy said proudly. "She was magnificent." Agatha ignored them both. "We need to get him to confess, preferably while Bill can overhear." Charles stroked his chin. Smoot is vain and terrified, a combination ripe for manipulation." "Exactly," Agatha said. "We tell him someone else has damning evidence, someone he trusts." "Who does he trust?" Charles asked. "No one," Agatha admitted, "but he does fear social disgrace." Charles smiled slowly. "Then we must convince him he's already disgraced. Force him to panic. He'll try to shift blame and reveal details." Roy clapped. "Oh, delightful. A social ambush." Agatha felt a flicker of exhaustion beneath her adrenaline. She hated needing Charles's charm, hated that he seemed amused by the danger. But she also knew he was right. Charles tilted his head. "Agatha, are you prepared to provoke him? Properly provoke him?" "I've been provoking men my entire life," she said. "It's my most reliable skill." "Wonderful," Charles said. "Then let's expose a killer." They stood there a moment, Castle peaceful around them, the sunshine warm, the hedges humming with bees, the village ignorant of the drama simmering beneath its surface. Agatha felt the tug of determination anchor inside her. Petunia had been awful, meddling, vain, cruel even, but she deserved justice. Hodge, visible through her cottage window, lifted his head and stared at her as if reminding her that she owed him dinner. But the small domestic scene anchored her, kept the world steady. Agatha took a slow breath. "Smoot thinks he's won," she murmured. "He thinks he's safe. He thinks I'm just a woman with gossip." Charles grinned. "Then let's show him exactly how wrong he is." Agatha smiled faintly, feeling that familiar fire rise. Yes, she would show him. She would trap him, corner him, catch him. And she would do it with the full force of a Castle woman scorned, underestimated, and determined. Petunia's secrets would be avenged, and Dr. Smoot would soon learn that Agatha Raisin never, ever backed down. A soft amber glow filled Charles Frayth's manor that evening, the fire crackling in the drawing room as though eager to watch the impending drama. Agatha Raisin sat stiffly in an armchair, tapping her foot at a tempo that suggested imminent violence. Roy Silver fluttered around the room like an excited stagehand, draping curtains, adjusting lamps, and testing his portable tape recorder with theatrical flourishes. Charles lounged on the sofa, one ankle crossed over the other, swirling a glass of wine in a manner he clearly believed made him look mysterious and aristocratic. "Stop posing," Agatha snapped. "I'm thinking," Charles replied. "You pose when you think." "Then it's an efficient system," he said smugly. Agatha ignored him, focusing instead on the plan. Smoot had finally slipped, subtly but decisively, and she needed proof. Hard proof. The kind Bill Wong could use to put Smoot away. After days of dead ends, distractions, and villagers pointing fingers at each other with alarming enthusiasm, the mystery was on the brink of snapping into place. Roy adjusted the curtain one more time, then spun dramatically. "Right, the recording equipment is ready. And might I say, Aggie, this is the most glamorous sting operation Castle has ever seen." Charles raised an eyebrow. "How many sting operations does Castle usually have?" "One a decade, maybe," Roy said, "but this one has atmosphere." Agatha surveyed the room. They had arranged 3 chairs in a semicircle near the fire, giving the impression of an intimate, secretive consultation. A tray of tea sat waiting, innocent enough to lull the guilty. The curtains were drawn, the lighting dim, and the manor's old stone walls held the warmth like a conspirator. "He'll come," Agatha murmured. "He's terrified." Charles smiled slightly. Men terrified of scandal are very easy to manipulate. Roy pointed at him. "He means you, Charles." Charles sniffed. "I have never been terrified. Mildly concerned, perhaps." Agatha interrupted. "Both of you, hush." She stood, smoothing the front of her coat. Her stomach fluttered with nerves, not fear exactly, but a tense excitement. This was her element, a scheme, a confrontation, a chance to corner the truth with sharp words and sharper instinct. "Let's run through it again," she said. "Charles, you invited Smoot for a private emergency meeting with a wealthy client desperate to fix a failed cosmetic treatment. He'll think he's got an aristocrat on his side." "Yes," Charles said with a sigh, "I am the bait." "And I," Roy added grandly, "am the hidden genius capturing every syllable." "That's debatable," Agatha muttered. "Just make sure the recorder works." Before Roy could protest, the doorbell chimed. Agatha's pulse jumped. "Positions!" she hissed. Roy dashed behind the velvet curtain like a goblin disappearing. Charles set down his wine, stood smoothly, and strolled toward the door. Agatha stepped into place beside the fire, affecting the stiff, anxious poise of a woman desperate for cosmetic salvation. She clasped her hands. She tried to look insecure, which was, unfortunately, all too easy on a bad day. Charles opened the door. "Dr. Smoot, do come in." Smoot entered like a man expecting ambushes in every corner. His coat was damp, his slicked-back hair slightly wilted. He looked around nervously. "Lord Fraith, thank you for seeing me so late. Your message seemed urgent." "It is," Charles said smoothly. "My friend needs a consultation." Smoot's eyes landed on Agatha. His expression flickered between surprise, irritation, and poorly concealed dread. "Mrs. Raisin," he said tightly, "I was not expecting—" "I need help," Agatha interrupted, injecting her voice with faux tremor. "I made a terrible decision. I got a treatment from another practitioner. It went wrong." She tilted her head dramatically. "Look at the lines. Look at them." There were none, but Smoot leaned in with reflexive professionalism. Yes, I see the problem." "Can you fix it?" Agatha pressed. "Tonight?" He swallowed. "Tonight?" His gaze darted around the room. "Lady, Mrs. Raisin, these things require preparation and sterilization, and—" "I don't have time," Agatha insisted. "If I don't fix this before tomorrow, the WI will crucify me. You must help me." Smoot hesitated. His fingers twitched. Agatha saw the calculation forming. Money, favor, reputation. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Dr. Smoot, I know what you can do. Petunia told me." Smoot froze. Agatha continued softly, pressing the advantage. "She said you gave her the strongest injections. Special ones. Ones not on the market." Smoot's mouth opened, then snapped shut. Color drained from his face. For one glorious moment, Agatha thought he would confess right there, but he stammered instead. I provide only safe, regulated—" Agatha leaned in further. "She told me everything. The tea, the special compound, the way you—" Smoot cracked. "I never meant to kill her." There was a stunned half-second of silence. Roy burst from behind the curtain with a triumphant yell, tape recorder held high. "Got it. Every word." Smoot staggered back. "What?" His voice rose in panic. No, this is entrapment. This is—" Agatha planted herself in front of him. "You just admitted to it." I didn't say—" "You said you never meant to kill her." Smoot's breathing turned frantic. "No, I only meant to frighten her. She threatened everything. My practice, my future. She said she'd tell the papers I was using expired licenses and banned compounds." "So, you poisoned her," Agatha said. Smoot's eyes darted wildly. I just wanted her to stop. She was drinking tea. It was so easy." Roy clicked off the recorder with exaggerated satisfaction. "And that," he said, "is a wrap." Smoot lunged toward the door. Charles, who had been leaning against the wall with aristocratic nonchalance, moved with sudden, startling speed. He stepped forward, hooked a leg neatly, and sent Smoot sprawling to the floor with a thump that echoed across the manor. Agatha stared. "You did that on purpose?" Charles shrugged. "Eton rugby. Some skills linger." Roy applauded. "Well done. 5 stars. Encore." Smoot tried to crawl away, babbling about legal representation and misunderstandings, but his protest was cut short by a firm knock at the door. Bill Wong walked in, calm and resolute. "Evening," he said. "Agatha said I should come in 10 minutes. Looks like I'm 5 seconds early." Agatha gestured to the floor. "Your murderer. He just confessed." Smoot shrieked. "I want a solicitor." "Good," Bill said. You can call one at the station. He pulled out cuffs. Smoot continued wailing as Bill escorted him out into the night, leaving the manor unusually quiet in the aftermath. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Roy squealed, "We did it! Oh, Aggie, this was the most dramatic night of my life, and I've been to Eurovision rehearsals." Agatha allowed herself a small smile. Her chest felt lighter, her mind clearer. She had caught the killer. She had solved the mystery. She had proven once again that villagers who underestimated her did so at their own peril. Charles poured himself another glass of wine. "Well done, Agatha. You were magnificent." "Thank you," she said grudgingly. "Don't worry," he added. "I'll only remind you daily." She rolled her eyes. Of course. But beneath the sarcasm, a warm satisfaction spread through her. She had earned this victory. Later, at the Red Lion, half of Castley decided it was their civic duty to celebrate her triumph. Pints were raised, toasts were made. Even the older women of the WI offered reluctant praise, before muttering that Agatha really shouldn't have insulted a dead woman's forehead like that. Agatha simply lifted her chin and accepted the attention. She'd had worse. When she finally returned home, the village quiet again, she opened her door to find Hodge sitting in the hallway like a disapproving sentinel. He meowed sharply, unimpressed by her late arrival. "I solved a murder," Agatha told him. "Show some gratitude." Hodge responded by walking away with his tail held high. Agatha dropped her coat on the chair and sank into the sofa with a sigh. Her eyes drifted toward the evidence she'd gathered. The torn appointment card, her notes, the corrupted photo, and beneath them, Petunia's camera. She picked it up slowly. The device felt heavier now, knowing what it had captured. She flicked through the last few images again. The sleeve, the watch, the damning angle. Smoot had been so certain he could hide. But something tugged at her mind. A loose thread. An itch. That morning she had counted the final shots on the camera. There were supposed to be 3 images left. She had seen only one corrupted one, which meant 2 photographs were missing. Someone else had removed them. Someone who had access to Petunia's home. Someone who visited after the murder, or before. Agatha sat up straighter, pulse quickening anew. Smoot had killed Petunia, yes, but Petunia had been blackmailing someone else as well, someone who had gone to great lengths to destroy some of the evidence, someone still in Castley, someone still watching. She felt Hodge jump onto the sofa beside her, curling into her side like a warm, furry anchor. She stroked his head absently. "Oh no," she whispered to him. "This isn't over." Hodge blinked slowly, tail curling once, and Agatha Raisin, who had believed the storm had passed, suddenly sensed another rumble on the horizon, one far more personal and far more dangerous. A hard frost gripped Castley the next morning, glazing the village in a thin shimmer of ice that turned every hedge into something crisp and precise, as though winter itself had tidied the world. Agatha Raisin stood at her cottage window, arms folded, staring out at the sparkling road. If the weather intended to impress her, it could try harder. Murder cases did not care about glittering hedges, nor did unanswered questions. Hodge stretched luxuriously on the radiator cover, casting her a superior glance as if reminding her that sensible creatures spent frosty mornings indoors. Agatha ignored him. She had slept poorly again. Not from fear, Agatha Raisin never admitted to fear, but from stubborn irritation. Smoot was behind bars, the case was solved. Everyone in Castley knew it, and most had congratulated her loudly enough to drown out any doubts. And yet the doubts remained. 2 missing photographs, 2 secrets, Doris Simpson had said, one to destroy a man, one to embarrass a woman. Agatha grabbed her coat, muttering darkly, and stepped outside into the brittle cold. Frost snapped beneath her heels. Her breath puffed white in the air. She marched toward the village shop, the only place guaranteed to contain gossip before 9:30 in the morning. Doris Simpson was already there, rearranging packets of biscuits with the seriousness of a surgeon. She brightened when she saw Agatha, which annoyed Agatha even more. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin," Doris chirped. "Cold enough to freeze your nose to your face." "It's winter, Doris, not a vendetta," Agatha muttered. "I need a word." Doris perked up. "About Petunia, I suppose." "Yes. You said she had 2 secrets. What exactly did she tell you?" Doris leaned across the counter with relish. "Well, she told me she had something ruinous on a man, some sort of medical scandal, and something deliciously humiliating on a woman. Said the woman would never recover socially. Agatha felt a prickling sensation along her neck. Did she say which woman? Oh no, Doris said, eyes glittering. Petunia loved keeping people guessing. Said she would reveal both at the fate meeting. Make a spectacle of it. Of course she would, Agatha thought grimly. Petunia enjoyed spectacle as other women enjoyed cake. But if the first secret had been Smoot's illegal operation, what was the second? Agatha left the shop, frost crackling under each step. She headed toward the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby would know more. She always did. And even if she didn't, her gentle voice and warm kitchen were the closest things Agatha had to comfort. The vicar's wife opened the door with her usual serenity, as though she'd been expecting her. Agatha, come in out of the cold. You look troubled. Of course I'm troubled, Agatha snapped. There are still loose ends. Mrs. Bloxby ushered her inside to the warm sitting room, where a fire crackled softly and a teapot waited on the table. Agatha sat down, grateful despite herself. Smoot killed her, Agatha said, accepting a cup of tea. But someone else took 2 photographs from her camera. Someone with another secret. Mrs. Bloxby poured tea with the quiet elegance of a woman who had never known haste. Not all secrets are worth chasing, Agatha. Oh, yes they are, Agatha insisted. People don't remove evidence unless it's incriminating. Mrs. Bloxby hesitated. Agatha, you might not like the answer. Agatha froze. What do you mean? The vicar's wife folded her hands. I think I know what the second photograph was. Well, Agatha demanded, don't go all saintly on me, tell me. Mrs. Bloxby sighed softly. During the WI fate set-up last month, you were having a moment. Agatha frowned. A moment? You were muddy, Mrs. Bloxby said gently. Very muddy. You had slipped on the grass near the trestle tables. You were cross, you were smoking, Agatha guessed. Smoking and swearing, Mrs. Bloxby corrected. Quite loudly. Agatha's face heated. I was cold and wet. Of course, Mrs. Bloxby said kindly, but Petunia saw you. You were slumped on the ground, skirt askew, hair wild, complaining about the WI, the village, the mud, and several individuals by name. Agatha groaned, burying her face in her hands. Oh, good grief. Petunia thought it was deliciously scandalous, Mrs. Bloxby added. She took a photograph. I told her not to, but she wouldn't listen. Agatha lifted her head. So she planned to reveal it. I believe so, Mrs. Bloxby said softly. It would have embarrassed you terribly, and Petunia loved nothing more than making others feel small. Agatha stared at her tea. The humiliation landed like a slap. She had expected many things, extortion, gossip, petty cruelty, but not a targeted attack on her own dignity. The idea of the WI seeing her sprawled in the mud, clutching a cigarette like a drowned rat, made her stomach clench. She was going to show that photograph at the fate meeting, Agatha said flatly. I'm afraid so, Mrs. Bloxby murmured. Agatha felt heat rise in her chest, embarrassment, anger, and something else she refused to name. Vulnerability. She hated vulnerability. She preferred outrage. Outrage kept her moving. Where is it now? She asked sharply. Perhaps with Petunia's belongings, Mrs. Bloxby said. Perhaps destroyed. But Agatha, you solved the murder. Must you chase every cruel scrap she left behind? Agatha stood. Yes. Mrs. Bloxby sighed again, but didn't argue. She walked Agatha to the door, pressing her hand for a moment. Whatever she captured, it doesn't define you. It would have, Agatha said bitterly, if she'd shown it. Only to people who don't know your strength, Mrs. Bloxby replied. The words lingered as Agatha stepped back into the frost, but they couldn't soothe the sting completely. She marched toward Petunia's house, determined to find the negative or the photograph. The Blatherwick cottage was cold and cheerless, as though relieved to be rid of its mistress. Agatha let herself in. The police had finished their search, and headed directly for the bedroom. She opened drawers, boxes, old handbags stuffed with receipts. Petunia hoarded nonsense, but never in an organized fashion. After 20 minutes, she found a small packet of negatives in a biscuit tin. She held them to the light. One strip was missing 2 frames, the same 2 missing from the camera. Her pulse quickened. Then she found it, tucked between pages of a lurid romance novel, a single negative, separate. Agatha held it up to the window. There she was, mud-smeared, hair flying, skirt rumpled, cigarette dangling from her mouth open mid-complaint. It was, without question, the single worst image ever committed to film. She groaned aloud. "Oh, Petunia, you vile woman." She stuffed the negative into her pocket and left, slamming the door behind her. Back home, Hodge greeted her with a soft meow, rubbing against her ankle. She scratched his head absently, staring at the negative in her hand. She could destroy it now, or keep it as a reminder, to be less vain, less careless, more controlled. But no, she preferred the comfort of selective memory, and this image was one memory she would rather see turn to ash. She knelt by the fireplace, fed the negative into the flames, and watched it curl and shrivel. The plastic twisted, blackened, then disappeared in a smoky wisp. "Good riddance," she muttered. Hodge jumped onto her lap, purring with the smug satisfaction of a cat who believed he had supervised something important. Agatha stroked him, the warmth of the fire softening her mood. She had solved the murder. She had exposed Smoot. She had protected her dignity from beyond the grave. It should have been enough. But Roy Silver, as always, had perfect timing for ruining peace. He burst through her door without knocking, breathless and excited. "Aggie, darling, we need to turn this whole thing into a PR campaign." "No," Agatha said flatly. "Think of it. Agatha Raisin, the woman who unmasked the Botox killer. We could do posters, a magazine piece, a radio interview. I know people." "Roy," Agatha said, lifting Hodge onto the armchair, "I am not turning a murder into a publicity stunt." He pouted. "Everyone else would." "I am not everyone else." "Darling, I know. You're better." Agatha felt her irritation soften slightly. She gave him a long look. "You really think so?" "Of course," Roy said, "but we should still do posters." "Get out," Agatha said. Roy obeyed with dramatic despair, sweeping out like a thwarted artist. When the door closed, Agatha leaned back, listening to the quiet. The fire crackled. Hodge stretched. Somewhere outside, the frost melted just enough to drip from the eaves. And Agatha Raisin, vain, stubborn, flawed and brave, allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. She had solved the murder. She had reclaimed her dignity. And although the village would gossip and Roy would scheme and Charles would tease, she had one small comfort. Some secrets, when burned, stayed burned. Hodge nudged her hand with his head. Agatha smiled faintly. "Come on then," she whispered. "Let's enjoy the peace while it lasts." Because peace in Castley never lasted long. A thin, pale winter sun pressed weakly against Agatha's cottage windows, the sort of delicate light that pretended spring might arrive early but fooled no one. Castley had slipped back into its usual rhythm, which meant the murder had been thoroughly chewed over, swallowed and regurgitated as village gossip. Dr. Smoot sat in a Mercer cell awaiting trial. George Blatherwick had stuck a "for sale" sign crookedly in his front lawn, loudly declaring that village life was overrated and full of petty tyrants, which most residents took as a compliment. Betsy Dimple, never one to miss opportunity, had repainted her salon window to read, "Botox-free natural beauty. True radiance starts with truth." Agatha suspected Betsy barely understood truth, let alone radiance, but she had to admit the woman's timing was impeccable. Agatha sat before her fireplace, wrapped in a thick cardigan that made her feel both cozy and faintly matronly, a sensation she resented. The flames crackled politely. Hodge lay curled beside her like a judgmental cushion, occasionally flicking his tail in a way that suggested he found the entire world beneath him. Agatha couldn't blame him. The piece was dizzying after the frantic weeks of clues, lies, feuds, toxins, and that dreadful camera negative. She took a sip of tea, though she eyed the wine bottle on the sideboard with growing interest. Vanity, she thought with a grim smirk. Vanity had driven half the chaos. Petunia's hunger to look younger, Smoot's fear of being disgraced, Graham Dobson's terror of being exposed, even Charles with his spa demonstration photos, and herself, though she refused to dwell on that. She still felt a faint sting remembering the muddy photograph Petunia had taken, but she comforted herself that it now existed only as smoke. A knock sounded. Before she could rise, Mrs. Bloxby appeared at the door, her warm smile radiating a calm that could soothe a charging bull. Agatha let her in, partly because the vicar's wife was the closest thing she had to moral ballast, and partly because no one refused Mrs. Bloxby. It simply wasn't done. "Just checking on you," Mrs. Bloxby said as she stepped inside. "It's been quite an ordeal." "I'm perfectly fine," Agatha said, realizing immediately that the statement sounded defensive. "Really? A murder here, a poisoning there. I've handled worse." "Of course you have," Mrs. Bloxby said gently. "Still, you solved this one admirably." Agatha felt a pleased warmth settle in her chest. Praise from Mrs. Bloxby always landed softly, like a feather that somehow carried weight. The vicar's wife glanced toward the mantelpiece where a small stack of newspapers lay. "You're not reading the coverage?" "Oh, I skimmed it," Agatha said. "Most of them got the details wrong, and one journalist implied I was a woman of advancing age." Mrs. Bloxby hid a smile. "Well, they can't accuse you of being dull." "If they did, I'd sue," Agatha muttered. The vicar's wife sat for a moment, watching Hodge stretch and resettle. "You know, Agatha," she said softly, "true beauty is revealed in good deeds. You helped bring justice. That lasts longer than any face cream." Agatha made a non-committal noise. Mrs. Bloxby's brand of gentle wisdom often left her feeling both comforted and faintly scolded. "Yes, well," Agatha said, "if good deeds came in moisturizer form, I'd consider it." Mrs. Bloxby laughed, then rose. "I'll leave you to your evening. And Agatha, don't be too hard on yourself. Even the strongest women feel lonely sometimes." Agatha scowled in embarrassment. "I'm not lonely." "Of course not," Mrs. Bloxby said kindly, and left. Agatha shut the door and stood there, the cottage settling into quiet around her. She glanced at the wine bottle again. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she muttered, and poured herself a modest glass. She carried it back to the fireside and settled in again. Hodge climbed into her lap as though he owned it. She stroked his warm fur absently. "You know," she said aloud, not sure whether she was talking to herself or the cat, "I might be a little lonely." Hodge blinked slowly at her, which she decided to interpret as sympathy. She took a sip of wine. Not too much. She didn't want to look soft. Then she lit a contemplative cigarette, letting the first curl of smoke drift upward as she stared into the fire. A cigarette at a moment like this wasn't indulgence. It was punctuation. Outside, Carsley exhaled the faint mist of evening. Chimney smoke carried the smell of winter settling in. Somewhere in the distance, someone slammed a car door. The world was returning to its ordinary shape. Agatha leaned back, letting the warmth seep into her bones. She should have felt triumphant. She had outsmarted a killer, outmaneuvered blackmailers, and burned the only evidence that could have humiliated her. The case was closed, order restored, her reputation intact, and yet... Her eyes drifted to the small card on the table beside her. An invitation, written in Charles Frayth's maddeningly elegant handwriting. "Winter Gala, Morton in Marsh, Saturday evening. Wear something dramatic." Agatha snorted. Charles would emerge unscathed from a nuclear blast and still manage to look smug. The idea of attending a gala with him promised mischief, annoyance, flattery, and at least one embarrassing moment. It was almost enough to lift her mood. "You suppose I should go, Hodge?" she asked. Hodge yawned, a vast feline sigh that seemed to say he had no interest in galas, humans, or anything except sleeping in warm laps. "Yes," Agatha said thoughtfully. "That's what I thought too." Still a small smile tugged at her mouth. Trouble was certain, and probably delightful. And perhaps, just perhaps, she wanted a bit of delightful trouble. After all, peace had never suited her for long. She took another slow sip of wine, watching the fire dance. Carsley was quiet. The night was soft. Her case was closed. Her dignity was safe. And tomorrow, life would begin its slow drift back to gossip, WI meetings, awkward flirtations, and the eternal battle with mud. Agatha Raisin breathed in, breathed out, and let herself ease into the moment. Maybe she wasn't wrinkle-free. Maybe she wasn't serene. Maybe she wasn't the sort of woman who aged gracefully. But she was the woman who solved murders, lit cigarettes with flair, survived village politics, and faced down poisoners. Not bad, she thought, for a middle-aged woman with muddy skirt memories. The fire snapped. Hodge purred. Agatha smirked. "Fine," she murmured. "I'll go to the gala." And with that, the night felt just a little warmer.